Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my overview of Drill Core. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. Have a look at the first 2 hours of a game because it's a Steam refund window. Steam reckons that you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and generally, as a rule, I would agree and say 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video. I give you the broad strokes info, keep it around 10 minutes, and then you can make up your own mind. Okay, well look, let's lead with this. This is under publisher Tiny Build, who've exploded in the past few years. Always happy to have a look at their stuff. Hungry Couch Games is the dev, and they've played with Tiny Build before in Black Skylands. If you missed that, that's a really cool game. It's kind of top down, but this sky punk, sort of open world-ish, you're driving your airship around sort of thing. A really cool game, great art aesthetic, and that's carried over here. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it, that one is forced top down, and this is forced side on. Unusual. Also, very big pivot. This is totally different genre, sort of wave defense, colony, economy kind of thing. But I like to point that out. It's always good to see a studio not only get its second shot, but try something unusual and something different. And the strongest part about this is its aesthetic, right? It's mouthfeel. Big burly dudes with drill guns going underground, and they've all got Brooklyn accents. Hey, I'm drilling here. It's spot on, masterclass. And at first blush, you might get a bit excited because you have overlap with me. Now, you can feel the other shoe gonna drop, and the issue is that the balance is off on the two core loops, which I would say is one tower defense, and then the other one sort of colony management / economy end. Now, I'll concede this could be totally personal taste, but I just want to make sure that it's clear, because having a look at it, you might be excited, but if you're someone like me that finds the economy end of colony management more interesting, you might actually be disappointed. The loop, broadly speaking, is that you're this cool, it's got a cool world building idea that it's kind of like that Sunshine movie, absurd science, the idea of restarting the sun. Well, this is the idea that your planet's either too hot or too cold. These pricks are going to drill down into the center on a cool moving platform and either, turn the heat up or lower it down by dropping some sort of MacGuffin explosive device in the center. It's cool. It's good enough. That's all I need. So yeah, essentially you just keep drilling. It's split into a day-night cycle where during the day, your drillers kind of autopilot drill through the mine. You tag blocks that you want them to drill out and they will do it. You have 3 types of worker ants, the driller dudes. You've got couriers that will carry the shit back up for you, and that's your resource income. And then you've got kind of like gunman, protector, trooper dudes. So they drill during the day, they earn resources. You can build out your base with different buildings that are doing all sorts of things. And then you can also build turrets on the walls of the sort of shaft that you've drilled into. So kind of leans a bit more wall world than say Dome Keeper, but clearly they're the games that kicked off this thing. So far so good. What's the problem, Scar? Well, okay, so the problem is that every now and then when you level up, you get like an upgrade, right? It's roguelite as anything. So you'll get 3 things to choose from. You can pick one. And 95% of the upgrade building things that you can unlock are turrets. The other 5%, and I'm not even exaggerating, it's hardly anything that's economy based. Essentially, your entire economy serves to be 1/3 of the game to feed into the tower defense. And to me, it's almost like stumbling before the finish line. Obviously, judge a game for what it is and not what you want it to be, but I don't particularly love tower defense games. And again, this is where I said it might be a personal thing. If you live for tower defense games and you kind of are the inverse of me, maybe you suffer the economic side of it and you just want to get all the cool different turrets with the interplay, buy this, man. This is exactly what you want. But I also feel that there's a not insignificant amount of people that recognize that the antagonistic combat end of a lot of these games is more a necessary evil than a core loop. And it might be an unfair comparison, but think about something like Factorio. The amount of people that turn the bugs off in that is actually significant. I know so many people, anecdotally of course, that just refuse to play with that bug force, or at least turn it down. Now, I won't go that far. I like playing a game for what it is on its terms, but that's sort of the direct opposite. The draw for Factorio, not to get sidetracked, but to try and impress my point, is building up that economy and automating your income, that sort of thing. And the bugs will keep you honest, right? They'll attack you now and then. They give you something to work towards, but they're not the main draw. So this is the opposite. Your economy is fairly shallow, fairly light, and once you sort of crack the code, you've got an idea of how it works, and the rest of it is all these turrets, which I wasn't super wowed with because it gives you some machine gun turrets at the beginning that I haven't really had an issue holding off any of the enemies with that, so I haven't been incentivized to kind of diversify my turret portfolio. Because it gives you all sorts of grenade launchers and all sorts of crap lasers, and then you can get support buildings to synergize with them. Like the machine gun example, you can get ones that affect machine guns only. But truly, I was not feeling that pressure, which probably leads into the next part. Obviously, I played this for 2 hours. I've actually played it for a fair bit more because I picked up the demo because the demo talked to me as well. I was like, oh, this looks really cool. So if you did play the demo, this is much the same, but a lot of the progress seems to be heavily outsourced to meta progression. And while I think the idea, and I don't want to go through the whole history lesson, of rogue lights, which are the modern version, which have meta progression, which is to say you do a run, then you buy upgrades to do more, that sort of thing. So a lot of your progress and your ability to even move forward is contingent on buying meta progression. And the harder you outsource that sort of shit, the less it becomes about, you know, player agency and a fun loop, and the more it becomes like, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to grind for 5 hours until I unlock the actually good stuff. And I fear that that's what's going on with this game. That's why I'm not seeing a lot of returns on the turret heavy focus. Too Long didn't want to listen to it. It's given me so many turrets and synergies and interplays which are totally irrelevant in all the early levels that I've played, and all that's really left me with is someone that just wants to buy the basic turrets because they do the job, they keep the monsters off during the nighttime, and explore the economy, which in light of that comes across as fairly shallow. And just to give you a bit more of where I think maybe the design's a little bit off the rails, like there's caps on certain buildings. You build a barracks, you can build 5 barracks or something, and then you can't have any more. So you have a population limit, which probably will change with meta progression later on, but let's call it 15 workers or whatever, you know, you pick your ratio. They get more and more expensive, so by the time you're buying the 15th one, it costs like 3 ore or something instead of 1, which is pretty exorbitant. And it would seem as the levels progress, the difficulty spike in the digging economy end is kind of trying to micromanage your 15 different miners as they uncover monsters or fire geysers or falling blocks. And the result of that is it becomes, I wouldn't say necessarily stressful, but very plate spinny. You have to really kind of pay attention to these dickheads and make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble. And the penalty is at the top end of your economy that if a dude gets killed by a falling block or sets himself on fire, you have to pay a ridiculous premium to buy him back. And I don't know what the term is for this, but that's less about expanding, you know, to use the unfair Factorio comparison, that's less about expanding and growing the factory or the economy or whatever shapes. Pick anything that you want where you're kind of rewarded for your work effort, whereas this is just maintenance mode. You'll have your dudes maxed out, and the factories provide passive ore as well, which the existence of that kind of points to maybe the developers are aware of a problem that you can brick yourself or something like that. But the idea is that even when you've got your economy kind of going full bore, you have to just supervise it and repay at what feels like an unreasonable tax as your dudes basically get themselves killed. It goes from cute and charming and, oh, he got killed by a block, that's funny, into kind of frustrating. So look, I'm not trying to be hard on this game, but it was one of those things that, like, the issue is specific, it is a problem, it's not the end of the world, it's a cool game and I think people will get value out of it, but it required a little bit more dissecting to convey my point, and I hope I have done that successfully. So ultimately, because my audience mimics me to a point, you know, we have overlap. If you are more colony management inclined and you look at this and it appeals to you, maybe be careful jumping into it. If you are more tower defense inclined, then absolutely grab this. But even those examples, Dome Keeper, Wall World, whatever, I feel like they got the balance a bit better, and that might just be for me personally. However, those were blowout successes, so you can't really argue with that. And I felt, not that I disliked the wave defense mechanic of it, but it wasn't the king's share of the gameplay. In fact, Dome Keeper, if you think about it, it's the inverse. Probably a quarter of your gameplay loop was going back at nighttime to defend the waves, and it was thrilling and and a bit of a payoff, but the most of your sort of gameplay loop usually in this genre is more about the digging underground and exploring that part. Anyway, such are my thoughts. I may chip away at it because at the end of the day, it's a fairly cheap, very well polished from a good pedigree studio time waster, and I mean that with affection, right? Not every game has to be, high cinema and melt your brain. Again, going back to the Factorio thing, getting into Factorio can be an exhausting experience. So there is definitely space in your gaming portfolio for something a little bit lighter. So yeah, I would recommend it, but tread carefully and consider my caveats that I've put on the table. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.